Hey friends, welcome back to Pastor's Wives Tell All. We are honored to have one of our favorite people on the podcast today. Mary Demuth is a literary agent, daily podcaster at the PrayEveryday.show, scripture artist, speaker, and the author of over 50 books, including 90-Day Bible Reading Challenge. She lives in Texas with her husband and is the mom to 3 adult children. Find out more at marydemuth.com. In our conversation with Mary, we discuss the heartache and disillusionment that came with spiritual abuse and church hurt. Mary vulnerably shares her very real pain while resting in the fact that God is still good and that the local church can be healthy. Now let's get to this important conversation.
I'm Jessica.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Stephanie. And you are listening to Pastor's Wives Tell All,
a podcast by pastors' wives for church leaders and anyone desiring to take a peek inside our glass house.
We are breaking down walls and crushing pastors' wives stereotypes within the church.
We want pastors' wives and other ministry leaders to know that they are not alone in this. Plus, this is basically therapy for the 3 of us with a whole lot of dance parties. Woo,
Friends, I'm so excited about today's episode. You want to know why?
Why? I mean, I do know why, because I'm
But the people that are listening don't know why. And the reason is our agent, our literary agent who helped us publish our first book, is on a call with us today. It's Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, guys. Girls.
Well, what's funny is the last time you were on with us was when we announced about the book coming and that you were our agent. And it was such a good conversation. It was a little bit heavy, but it was much needed. And for anybody who has not heard that episode, you need to stop right now before you finish this and go back and listen to episode 114, Healing from Sexual, Emotional, and Spiritual Abuse Within the Church.
Yeah.
And, you know, you always hope once you go through difficult circumstances like that, that it's done with and that you're not going to have to walk through something else. But sadly, we live in a broken world. And right now, there's a lot of people having to deconstruct a whole lot of things within the church. There are a lot of sins coming to light from churches all over the nation. And so we're seeing more and more abuse and more hurt coming out, which honestly I think needs to happen so that we can have some healing along the way in a more healthy church. So today's going to be another difficult conversation. So we want to prep anybody who's listening that this is going to be about church hurt again and possibly a little bit of abuse within the church. So for those, you know, if that's a trigger for you, maybe step aside from this one, but I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Okay, Mary. So do you mind, before we kind of dive in, just for those that maybe are not going back to listen to 114 yet, and they're just like, I'm ready to just hear from Mary now. Will you just give a brief summary of who you are and a little bit about you, and then I'll dive into the questions.
Well, mostly I'm literary agent of the Pastor's Wives Tell All. Like that's what I, live for.
Yeah. Sure. That's exactly what she lives for. I feel it.
Lots of other amazing authors too.
Yes, true. We have a good bunch. But I am a literary agent. I'm an author. I just handed in book 52. And I'm writing book 53 right now. Like a crazy lady.
I can't even fathom.
I know.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy. I've got 3 adult kids who pay their own bills, which is a success, and a husband of nearly 34 years. As I mentioned in my last conversation with you, just had a really rough upbringing. In fact, I've just been doing a little deep dive on complex post-traumatic syndrome, CPTSD, and I realized just how much that has affected me over the years. And so I'm not a newcomer to trauma. Also, I don't throw that word around lightly. I had to have CPTSD means you had ongoing neglect and abuse for years. And so that was definitely my story. Met Jesus at 15 and began the healing journey there. And recently, and what we'll be talking about today is we left a church of 23 years, a church we loved just this last December, and have subsequently found a new church, and it's been lovely. But the aftermath of all that has been lingering. The pain has been deeper than I ever expected. And I have found fellowship and camaraderie, kind of a broken camaraderie with those who have walked through spiritual abuse and church hurt and Christian celebrity culture, which is kind of creepily woven into all those things.
Well, thank you, Mary. Yeah. So like you said, we are going to dive into just a very deep emotional subject for you that you've been going through for the past couple of years. And I think one thing that, just to start off, when you said 23 years, that's a long time to be at one church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so crazy and so cool of how long the Lord had you there. But also, I think, and maybe as we dive in today, you'll talk a little bit about this, but I also know that there's a lot of people that stay in churches for 23 years and stay in churches longer than they need to because of complacency, because it is familiar and it's really hard to know when to leave. And so I'm not saying that is your case, but also I want people to know that sometimes it's really hard to leave. When we went through our church hurt, I thought that people would leave because of what was happening from the pulpit, but they didn't, because of complacency and being comfortable was more important to them than truth and what was being preached and who was preaching it. So I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from what you're going to talk about today. But can you, if you do go back and listen to episode 114, you're going to hear that there were some, like you said, trauma and abuse within the church, but also you have had that broken past, you and your husband within the church, and you were pastors of a church. But now you find yourself in the same situation, a little bit different, but dealing with hurt and trauma. And so can you kind of just share what has been going on in your life, you and your husband's life over the past, how long has it been since it started?
Oh, probably 3 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of when did you start to see red flags? What kind of happened through this process, and kind of just take us there with you?
Sure. So we had a little bit of pieces of background. We did attend a large church, a mega church in suburban Dallas area. And it was, at least at the time, I'm not sure if it is now, but at the time it was part of the SBC. And so we were the first missionaries that the church sent to the mission field that wasn't IMB, which stands for International Mission Board. I have spoken from the front of the church before. I've done several conferences. I recorded a Bible study video with a major Christian publisher that we recorded there. My husband was an elder there for 5 years. We led a very successful life group over all those 23 years that we were there. In fact, that's what kept us there for so long. So we weren't just like casual congregants.
Yeah.
And we began to see during a regime change. So most of that time that we were with the church was with the mostly founding pastor. He came like a year or two after the church had begun, like in the 80s. But he was definitely the legacy pastor, and he's all we knew for a really long time. And when the regime change happened, initially everything was fine, but it's just been in the past 2 to 3 years that we just began to notice yellow flags, then red flags, and which culminated in a meeting. I was already feeling like something's wrong, but we had a meeting where a relative of the new pastor told us quite frankly that there was no place for us to serve. And my husband said, well, I went to seminary and we've church planted, and we would love to pour into new leaders because we have had cross-cultural experience. We've had church planting experience. We've gone through the mill. We naturally love to pour into the next generation of leaders. And he said, it'll never happen. And then he said, I know 30 people that have masters in theology that we will never use, and you're just going to have to get over it. And so that was about 9 months before we decided to leave, because we decided that we would leave only if both of us agreed. We wanted to be on the same page. And so it just took some observation of a lot of misogyny from the pulpit, and then blatant and I don't even know how to say it, acceptable plagiarism. It's not acceptable, but in the person's mind, it was totally fine to completely plagiarize every sermon, or mostly every sermon. And so it was constantly being caught, but he believed that that was just an acceptable practice, which I couldn't, as a writer, I couldn't get over it. I just couldn't get over it. And then all of the things that we were privy to, because we were high up, of how former staff were being treated, or how they were treated when they were let go, and the whole NDA thing, and just a multitude of probably 25 red flags, including national news, that made us be like, and we left before all the national news came, but we were fed up prior to that point.
Right.
Can I just say the NDA thing? That to me is such a red flag everywhere. I'm actually doing this deep dive into cults. Like watching everything and reading everything I can on the subject. It is fascinating to me. But there are so many churches that run very cult-like. And one of those things that almost all of them have are NDAs that they have their people sign, which to me, I don't even understand, which, you were forced to
it's forced.
sign 1 years ago.
These are forced NDAs. These are forced NDAs with coercion and holding financial stuff over you. These are not like rando NDAs. And NDAs really, as you know, are they were created in the business world, which then is a whole nother thing. Like this is a whole business model, but to protect secrets of copyright and trademark and, processes. Which
is the right way to do it.
Right.
Why are we doing that in the church?
Not to protect the malfeasance of bad operators who are doing illegal and or immoral things.
Yes. It's terrible. It is absolutely terrible.
Oh my goodness. Sure. Wow. So how did you, with all of these red flags, because there were a lot of them apparently, like how did you realize, like how did you and your husband finally come to the conclusion, okay, like it's time for us to go?
Enough's enough.
Yeah, well, we would deconstruct each sermon on the way home from church because usually each time there was a dig at women. And I was just getting fed up with it. And I was feeling beat up. Like if there was ever sexual sin mentioned, it was always the woman's fault. Like she was just insecure, or she chased after a guy, or, it was always a woman's fault. And theologically, there were just some issues there too, which can be something you can divide over. I'm not going to split hairs there. But the main thing for me was, as an advocate for sexual abuse survivors, and as someone who stood on the SBC convention floor and talked to those folks that seemingly were going to do stuff and never did, I couldn't go to this church anymore and be a representative for abuse victims of a pastor who so clearly demeaned and undermined and undercut women. I mean, it was stunning. And the lack of repentance and all of that was stunning.
Wow.
I'm thinking, I'm hearing so much of this with women. And I think I'm realizing that lately I maybe even overthink things that I hear from people. And I'm like, was that a dig? Was that? And I don't know if maybe I'm processing a little bit of trauma and I didn't even realize how much words that people said, especially years ago to me when I was in this world of like blogging, writing, whatever, and having a little bit of a voice, that everything that was said, there was like a dig. Or like, oh, she's just trying to, get people to look at her, or she's whatever, just different things like that, as if I needed to be quiet. Or I was even told flat one time that I just needed to be quiet and let my husband take care of a situation. And even though he was overseas and was not available, and it was a teenager and it was a girl, but I was not, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't the one they wanted to hear from. And so I am very sensitive to those things too.
I would add to that one of the things that happened to me this year when I started speaking publicly, and I wasn't using names or anything like that, but I was definitely speaking publicly because I knew there were hundreds of victims, and I knew that many of them had signed NDAs and they had no way to voice what they were going through. So I was going to voice it for them. And someone in major leadership at the very top of the org chart contacted one of my husband's friends and said to him, tell your friend, Patrick, which is my husband, tell Patrick to tell your wife to be quiet.
Wow. Wow.
Well, and I think that just shows right there, the enemy is coming to steal, kill, and destroy what Jesus is trying to make like light of,
right?
Like what he is trying to show light to sin and things that are happening. There's always going to be someone to shut it down, and I think like what I love that I hear from you is like such, like, I know a lot of turmoil is happening. I know we're going to talk more about that in the heartbreak, but what you didn't do is you didn't stop fighting.
Right.
You did have to take moments, I'm sure, of just being with the Lord and being with accountable people and encouraging people and all of that. But the biggest thing when battle comes our way, we have to be prepared to fight it and not sit and go, well, poor me, I'm brokenhearted, I can't do anything. No, Jesus can heal you and you get back into battle. Think about military. They go back into battle still injured.
Yeah.
They're fighting for what is right. And so I love like just how you were like, I don't care, who's going to try to silence me. I know that I have a voice that came from Jesus, and to speak this and to protect and to defend. So no matter who's high up, they're not in charge of me. Only God is, and so I just like want to tell you, just so proud that you did fight and you are continuing to fight. And I am sure one day there will be a book that will come out about it, and blogs and stories and all of these things. I think
she's even written one.
Yeah.
So she's going to have to do another one.
Well, no, I think I feel like there'll be another one about this.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just think like, everything that happens, you're learning you're diving even deeper into this. And a lot of it, like you said, goes to the past trauma that has happened in your life. So I'm just, we're proud of you for the stand that you're taking, and that we know that has to be so hard, especially doing it broken, but you're doing it.
Well, and it's a big entity and it has a lot of power, and the backlash is severe. And I live in the town, and the town's biggest church is this church. Everywhere I go, I'm looking behind me. I'm wondering who's talking about me. And that could just be my own, thoughts or whatever, but it is very awkward. And we even briefly thought, should we just leave this town? But this is our home. And this very town is what houses our new church. So we're happy here now. But there is, I think, a lot of people that have left churches quietly. They're going to experience a lot of the same things that I'm experiencing. Absolutely. The loss of relationship, the loss of connection, the bitterness that can come, the cynicism that can come. But when you advocate there's a whole nother level of vitriol that comes against you. And
Yes.
I've been cautious about my public facing face on this, but it has come out. And so, and anyone that does a quick Google search, they'll know exactly where I came from. But, I guess what I'm saying is if you find yourself in a place where you are going to be vocal about a leader that has gone off the rails, or a church that has become more corporation than body of believers, just prepare yourself, have a prayer team, and prepare your heart for the inevitable backlash, because it will come, and it does sideline you, and you do need to retreat. But the reason people like me do what we do is for the sake of the broken ones left behind, and the ones that can't seem to put a voice to the pain, people that are turning to substances because they're so brokenhearted, or they're completely deconstructing their faith. So I have to do it. I have to. And that's not ego. I literally gain nothing from this. I lose a lot, but I gain nothing from it.
Yes, exactly.
It's funny because my husband's parents went through a very ugly situation in a church, and afterwards they just had the mindset of, oh, we can't talk about it. And there was a pastor of that church, and I'll say it. I mean, he was a liar. He lied from the pulpit about Isaac's parents, and that it was all their choice to leave and whatever. They used them, I would say, underpaid and used. There's a lot of other things that happen. And they had this mindset of, oh, well, we don't talk about those things, and we're just going to move on quietly. And I'm like, but all you're doing is setting it up for someone else to be hurt. If you're not bringing this to the light, there's going to be problems down the road. And I remember even having a conversation with a couple that was close with my husband's parents. And they, I had made a comment about that it's not okay. And literally in the middle of me saying one comment about it, he cut me off and started praying for the meal.
Wow.
This man. And I thought to myself, really? This is where we're at, where we can't talk about hard things and we can't bring things to the light like this. And I think looking back on it now, I'm more going, what is this twilight zone that we live in where we can't talk about these things, and where, especially if a woman brings it up, because a man can sit there and talk all day long, but the woman brings it up and all of a sudden we got to pray for our meal and change the subject.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's definitely an epidemic that's happening. So we've heard the red flags. We are hearing what happened, a summary of what happened. We're not going into details, of course, but we also want the people out there that are listening and going, oh, this is me, or, oh, wow, I didn't even know that's a red flag. So how did you and your husband, other than, I love that y'all said we're not leaving until both of us feel called to leave. I think that's your first step. So what was the process of, once it was time to leave, you left, but then how is the healing and restoration? How is all that happening on top of standing up for what's right?
We decided to leave, and then we told someone in leadership, and then they said, well, we want you to talk to someone higher in leadership, which we did. And then we told our life group that we were no longer going to be life group leaders. And then we quietly left, and we were quiet for a couple months, just kind of licking our wounds. But then when the national news hit and we began to hear all the stories of broken people, that's when I went more public, was interviewed for the Houston Chronicle, was on the Julie Royce podcast. Those were my two big things I did. We gathered people quietly, and we began to minister to them over a series of 6 weeks, and had meetings and talked about narcissistic structures. Now that was very good, and it helped a lot of people. What I didn't realize, and in a cautionary tale, is that I was in the middle of the grief And so to pile on more stories on me at that time, it literally put me under, and I still haven't crawled back out. I'm still overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the stories. And because I am an empathetic person, which is good and bad, I absorb it. I would be a terrible counselor because I would just absorb everyone's problems and be sad for the rest of my life. I can't compartmentalize it. It just becomes part of me.
So deeply.
Yeah, do you? Yeah. So that's what happened. And then in terms of healing, we made a decision that we did realize we wanted to go to church. And, I know some people that they're so hurt in that situation, and I offer all the grace in the world that they just have to stay away for a while. And I get that. You can't heal in a traumatic environment or anything that triggers you. You have to be safe before you can heal. But for us, we're long-term believers. We've been burned by church before. But we just knew we had to find a group of people that would love us. And our priority was close to home. And of course, some theological things that we held dear. And we ended up landing in a church. And it has been the best part of our healing process. And we have made new friends, and we have lost a lot of friends, honestly. And that's a grief. But that was the beginning of us starting to kind of crawl out of this deeply, I don't know how to say it without crying, but just this hole of, wouldn't say unworth, but just this hole of pouring yourself out for over 2 decades to a people that you thought were your allies. And to have those people shape shift on you and then to make you a villain when your heart is to have a prophetic voice toward the church because you love the church, not because you want to tear down the church. You want to see it be healthy. So does the Lord, not to equate myself with the Lord, but that wound inside of me is still there. And I don't know when it will ever be fixed, maybe on the other side. But right now it is gaping, it is bleeding, and it is something I can barely describe.
Yeah. Hey friend, we will get right back to our episode, but we want to take a moment and thank our patrons. You guys keep our podcast going.
If you are not a patron and you would like to consider donating to our podcast ministry, we would be so grateful, and we might even do a happy dance.
When you become a patron, you get perks like being the first to hear about special info and retreats. You get bonus episodes, monthly devotionals, lock screens, and more.
Plus, we have added a new $1 tier for those who believe in us and what we're doing, just because you love us.
So head on over to our show notes and click on the Patreon link to learn more. Now let's get back to our episode. I'm so sorry, Mary. I mean, thanks. All of us can feel and hear how much you're hurting. And what's so sad is, obviously this is a large church where you're at, but it's sadly not the only church who operates that way. So what would you say? I mean, you can give us encouragement, constructive criticism. If you could talk to the leadership of churches as a whole right now, what would you say directly to the leadership?
I know this isn't a panacea, but I would say go to the book of Acts and read the letters of Paul and look at what the church looked like back then. And stop trying to be Egypt. So Egypt, you think of Egypt, you think of pyramids, right? You think of Pharaoh at the top with all sorts of latchkeys underneath, right?
Right.
But our church structures today are very Western. They're very capitalistic. They're very corporate. And there is like 1 or 2 people at the top and then everyone kind of in a pyramid scheme beneath it. And I believe what the Lord is doing prophetically is he's softening that. We still need leadership. I'm not against that at all. We need godly leadership, but there needs to be a plurality of leadership. There needs to be, like when we heard there's no place for us in church, we are believers who have walked with Christ for decades. And by all means, those kinds of people, and let's take ourselves out of it, but people like us should be in the fabric of a church. They should be the most prized. And again, not for my ego, but just in terms of, for me, looking at older believers, seasoned believers, they should be interwoven into the leadership structure of a church. And we should have a plurality. All of us are ministers. The pastors and the elders and the overseers, however you want to say it, the deacons, their job is to equip the saints for works of service. We are the ministers, but somehow along the line, we have begun to believe that the person at the top of the org chart is the supreme being, and we are just cogs in a machine. And I was a cog and I got spit out, and it doesn't feel good. So I would say my encouragement is study what community is, what oikos is, what fellowship is, koinonia. What does it look like? What is the church? It is a called out people. It is a remnant. It is so many other things, but it is not an org chart with a male leader with an ego at the top doing desperate things to keep his empire. That's not the church.
It's so good.
Empire. Once again, the cult life. Literally how those things are structured. And so it does make me like cringe to think that we have let that seep into the Christian church.
Yeah.
So sad to me.
Before we end, Mary, let's go back to just, the pain that you're going through right now. I will say, just from someone that I have been through a lot of the pain of what you're talking about. And I will say that right now it feels so heavy that you're not going to crawl out of it, but you will. It will take years. I will say that. It will take years. I remember literally just 2 weeks ago, I drove by the church that hurt us, the people that hurt us, and the building where the church is. And I remember driving by and being able to look at it and smile and go, I am healed. Yeah. And that was almost, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I drive by that church at least 30 times a week. And there's always a time where I just either roll my eyes or, go, ugh. And there's just like something in my heart and my soul that I know that I have to continue to forgive.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the people that hurt me and hurt my husband and my family are gone. It's still just a place where I can't look at. But the other day, to be able to look at it and smile and literally just say a quick prayer that God continue to move in that church. And so I do know that day will come. But for those that are dealing with the kind of pain that Mary is dealing with, like Mary said, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
And I think don't run from those feelings. So I would say don't run from the feelings. I think that I ran from my feelings for a long time with that. I did use the anger one a lot. I like that one. I might have said quite a few things over that first 2 years that weren't really nice and Christian-like. But I do think I did run from a lot of the feelings, and I really did not grieve, like you're saying, the friendships, because it's so many layers, right? I can feel like I'm healed from the pain of the pastor. And then I go, well, then I lost so many friends, or there was just pain of people not choosing you and choosing what I thought was the devil. So that's really hard in our brains to go, why would you choose evil over good?
Yeah.
And so there's just so many layers of pain and hurt. So I do promise you, as you know, because you have been through hurt from the church before, that you will heal. But as you know, from the book that you've written before and the people that you've spoken to, the people that you poured into at the first podcast that you spoke about, Jesus is going to use this. This is the next, this is your valley right now, but there's a mountaintop coming where he's going to need you to go and tell. But I love that he's already preparing you to go and tell, because you're not sitting on the sidelines even though you could go get in the fetal position and just be like, y'all leave me alone and let me eat my favorite snack and drink forever. But you're continuing. But there is a mountaintop coming where, what he whispers in secret will be told on the mountaintops and on the roofs. And so be prepared for that time. Because I never would have thought that I would be on this podcast sharing and having a book out there with the story of the church hurt, but how many people that God has used through my testimony to change people's trajectory.
Yeah.
Not because of me, but because how he worked through the rough times. So it's coming and we're going to be excited to see it and in expectation of what's to come and how God's going to use you. But just know that, we're here for you and just we're proud of you. And to leave before we ask the questions, you said that you're in you're still in a dark space right now. Let's sit in that for just a second, because I think we can really go over that a lot of times just in life because we don't want to go there. But I also want people to know that it's real, that you're not through it yet. So in these dark moments, how has it been for you? And what has been the catalyst to get you through these dark times? And what does it feel like?
Yeah, it feels like your foundation has been pulled out from underneath you. It's kind of like, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. It feels like an earthquake, and you can't rely on what you've normally stepped on and thought was solid ground. And of course, Jesus is that solid ground. But, a church you've been to for 23 years and have been in leadership, it's like, wow, it's just shifted within you. Unfortunately, I feel like this year's just been full of trials, but my luggage has been lost for a week and my journal is in there. And that is one of the places where some rando in the world is going to read all about church hurt because I processed it on the page. And I also processed it with a lot of conversations with people because I have to process it externally for me to get it out of me. A lot of people are that way. Some people are more like, oh, I'll just stick that inside. But even those who are more introverted still need to get it out of them, or it becomes a poison that stays inside. And so I did let it out in the pages of my journal, let it out in some safe relationships outside of the church. They're Christians, but outside of my context. And a lot of, I would like to say a lot of weeping, but I haven't let myself do that yet. I'm afraid, just to be super honest, I'm afraid if I start crying, I won't stop. So I've been very cautious about emotions, and I'm hoping that will still, I feel like there's a torrent in there. And then once I let it out, it's going to roar. So it's been hard.
Maybe it needs to.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, because I get that feeling of I don't want to cry because then I just can't stop. And these two know that lately I've just let some things rip and just start crying. I'm like, it is so freeing. To just be upset, or I go get in the shower and I just let it all out. Yeah. I'm like, whoo.
I don't know. Why do we as women feel good? like we can't? You know what I mean? Why do we as women feel like we cannot cry, or we feel like we have to apologize for crying, or that we have to be strong all the time? Let it out.
Yeah.
Let it out, Mary.
You're going to be stronger.
Absolutely.
We already know you're strong.
Well, it's okay to feel it. And I think that that's something that, I know that I have had to learn as I've gotten older, because when I was younger, I felt like I didn't have feeling things. If it wasn't what somebody else felt, that was silly for me to feel that way. So I think I just stopped recognizing the emotion, just stopped feeling altogether. And so I'm having to learn to re-feel again, but to let it out. But also I just had the thought when you were talking about your journal, I can't help but wonder, who is going to read that journal? I bet whoever opens that journal for the first time, I bet it is a God ordained moment, and they were supposed to open it and they were supposed to read it. And there's going to be something in there that speaks to them and maybe brings hope, to them. So
You'll get it back. They just are reading it first. You
Yeah.
got to give them a little time.
It's just a book that they borrowed from
It's
you.
a book that they borrowed. Oh, man. Okay. Now, as much as we could keep talking,
I know.
we can go to the 3 questions that we like to end with. But thank you so much for really sharing with us. And we pray that this will go out to the world and who needs to hear it. And also to hear that it's okay to cry. It's okay. You are still strong.
That's right.
We're actually stronger when we do cry, Mary. I'm telling myself that because I'm not good at that either.
Who's giving this advice here?
Yes. Well, no, I say it all the time. I tell my ladies, cry. I said, that is a struggle for me to cry and be vulnerable. And I think like you're a very strong woman, independent woman, and you've been able to do life and do it well. So to let go and release feels like it's like weakness, but really it's like
actually stronger.
It's stronger
to allow it to happen. Yeah.
So let it go, girl.
Just remember the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept.
Yes.
And you know, sometimes we look at that and go, that's silly. He knew he was going to raise this brother back and then everybody else would be okay. And Martha and Mary, it'd all work out in the end. But, and so that feels silly, right? But he wept. Yeah. And your situation really doesn't feel silly at all.
Yeah.
It feels like a good time to weep.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Anyway, yes, we have already asked you these 3 questions, but we're going to ask again because it's been a hot minute.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
That's right. So, first question. If you could go back and give your pre-ministry leader's self one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's going to change from the first time.
Run! Run away!
My heavens, that's great.
I mean, that's just the emotion of the day. But I guess a better answer would be
I liked that answer.
Be sure, and this is something I do with my writing, is be sure you have a prayer team, a team of people praying for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, so in the last couple of years, as you write books and as you have been leading and doing so many things, what do you do to just chill out and get your mind off of all the things by yourself? And also, what do, you and your husband, for fun?
Yeah, I've read that if you're a knowledge worker and you're doing things with your mind, to rest, you have to do physical things. And so I paint, I garden, I decorate, I cook, I walk and run and do an exercise. Those are things that that bring joy and help me to unwind from the knowledge work that I'm doing, because I'm doing a lot of output there. Patrick and I are foodies, so we love to go out to dinner, and we really do love to travel. So that's part of that health that we need as well.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, Mary, last question. If you could tell the church congregation one thing and have them really listen and respond, what would you say? Without reservation. Like, you just
get ready, church. Get ready.
I would say that the truth sets you free, and authenticity actually really does matter.
That's good.
That's so good.
I feel like that needs to be Mary's quote for this week when this podcast episode comes out.
Write it down, Steph.
Write it down.
It's happening.
Oh,
Loved it.
So good.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate you and your vulnerability, and just to know that we're not alone if and when hard things happen.
Yeah.
And we're faced with those people. So
yeah.
I also have something for your listeners if they are experiencing church hurt. So they can go to marydemuth.com/church hurt. And it's a checklist of about 100 things that I compiled from other people that have been through it, that you could go through and say, oh my gosh, yes, that happened, that happened, that happened. It gives words to the pain. And so that's just a free download at marydemuth.com/church hurt.
That's amazing.
And you have so many other resources too. We'll put some links in the show notes so they can find you in all the places and all of your millions of books.
Yes.
Okay, just 52, not millions. Just 52.
It feels like millions. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we love you, Mary. We're so grateful for you. And we're definitely still praying for you as you are going through the process of
Thank you.
what's been happening over the past couple of years. And we hope everyone else is too.
Mhm.
And until next time, everyone.
Bye for now.
Okay, friends, if you have enjoyed this episode as much as we have, please help us spread the word on Facebook and Instagram.
If you didn't know yet, Instagram is where all the fun is at. From dance reels on Wednesdays to spiritual encouragement and laugh out loud posts in between, there is something for everyone.
And last but certainly not least, if you could take a moment right now to stop what you're doing and give us a rating and review, even subscribe to our podcast, this seriously helps other people find us who wouldn't be able to otherwise. Thank you so much for your love and support. We hope you'll tune in next week.